This was round 7, played April 5th, 1960. And his opponent, Grandmaster Friðrik Ólafsson. Ólafsson was born in Reykjavik, January 26th, 1935. He's still alive, Ólafsson is. And if he lives to January 26th, 2025, he will be 90. Ólafsson tied for first place with Victor Korchnoi at Hastings in 1955-56. Pretty significant win there. He's a multiple-time Scandinavian chess champion, and he was the first player from Iceland to become a grandmaster. The title was awarded him when he qualified for the Candidates Tournament of 1959. That qualification came actually the year before at the Poderos Interzonal. So as of 1958, he was a grandmaster. Same tournament that Bobby earned his grandmaster title at. Ólafsson came first at Vikonsay in 1976. And did you know that he was FIDE president from 1978 to 1982? Now, he was not a professional chess player. He was a lawyer by profession. On to e4. We get a Sicilian defense with c5, knight f3, d6, and here, bishop b5 check is Canal's attack, and that's named for the Peruvian chess player Esteban Canal. He lived from April 19th, 1896 to February 14th, 1981. Nice long life. Canal was really active in the 20s and 30s. He was actually ranked number 8 in the world from the end of 1933 to the middle of 1934. Canal was born in Chiclayo, Peru, but he later lived in Italy. He died at Varese. This is Esteban Canal's attack. Bishop b5 check. That's, of course, answered by bishop d7. Bishop takes bishop. Queen takes bishop. Castles. Knight c6. Queen e2. Pawn g6. That's not the book move. The book move, knight f6. And that's answered by rook d1. After rook d1, showing the book line now, e6, d4, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn. And the most common continuation is bishop e7, pawn c4, castles, knight c3, knight takes knight, rook takes knight, and queen c6. Let's go back. G6 from Friðrik Ólafsson. C3, bishop G7. That's going to prevent D4 from being played. So now rook D1. And look at the eval bar, fairly equal. E5, clamping down on the D4 square. Knight A3. This knight can come to C4 or most often C2. King's knight E7. And now D4 is played. This move was played, speaking of Esteban Canal. That is the move preferred by Canal back in 1954 against Petar Trifunovic at Zurich. But we've since learned that white should play the knight to c2, and after castles, then play d4. C takes, etc. Coming back. Bobby, after king's knight e7, plays d4 right away, no doubt copying Canal's approach. Well, c takes d4, c takes d4, and here he should play knight takes d4. It's more compelling, hitting the queen, but he plays pawn takes the pawn. Knight takes the pawn, hits the queen, and compels knight takes the knight, and then pawn takes pawn can be played. Ólafsson with pawn takes pawn directly, and now this knight comes to b5 instead. That creates a three-way super attack on that pawn. So that pawn is gone. Ólafsson castles, and Bobby captures with his king's knight. d5, knight b3, a6, knight c3, d4 hits the knight, and knight to a4, threatening to fork the queen and the rook. So he played his rook to e8, his queen's rook, and that's marked inaccurate. The better deterrent or response to this threat is queen c7, and that escapes both threats, because the knight could also come to c5 and attack. That also prevents the bishop from coming to f4. Well, rook a e8 was played, and the bishop does come to f4, but since he didn't get out of the attack, perhaps knight a c5 was the move to play. The bot calls this a mistake and does call for knight a c5, as you can see right here. Knight ac5 does attack that queen, and then after queen c8, bishop f4 can be played. I guess you could have played queen c7 still and prevented bishop f4 at least. Then he'd have to come to d2. That's the only good square left. Bobby played bishop f4, and it's marked as a mistake. Knight d5 discovers a pin and attacks the bishop. So bishop g3, queen e7. Battery attacking that pinned pawn. So now knight ac5. That defends the pawn at least temporarily. And king h8. A mistake. Knight f6 is the preferable choice. That pin isn't going to be there all day. So the bot says, let's get our knight to safety. King h8 from Ólafsson, and rook e1. So, yeah, this battery attack can be evaded with queen d2, and that unpins the e-man, threatening the knight, but we have the added benefit of covering h6, precluding bishop h6. And so, black would have to play knight b6, or apparently knight f6. We're going to bring our last piece into the game in either case, no doubt. Rook e1 from Bobby. He plays knight b6 anyway here, and that's marked as a mistake. Yeah, knight db4 is a more active square, isn't it? The threat here, of course, is d3, defended by said knight. Interesting. That opens a line here. There's all kinds of complicated threats going on. Well, knight b6 was played, and queen's rook to c1 is played here. f5. Queen d2, getting out of any kind of trouble from the battery on the e-file. Queen f7 getting out of the rook's line of fire. So e takes f5, g takes f5, knight d3, knight d5. So knight c4 again attacks the queen a little bit better. Instead, knight d5 was chosen, bishop d6 hitting the rook. Rook g8, now knight a5. Super attacking the knight on c6. That's marked inaccurate, preferring the knight on b to c5 instead. Well, knight takes knight, and rook takes rook on e8. Mind your back rank. You are in a back rank weakness. Rook takes rook. Queen takes being preferred by the bot. Seems a little minor. Queen takes the knight here on a5. Now h6, giving the king a little bit of breath. Speaking of which, g3 resolves the back rank weakness, but h3 preferred by the bot, probably to keep the structure intact, but I'm assuming Bobby doesn't want his escape square to be a dark square with the dark square bishop on there. If this bishop is ever allowed to come to the b8 h2 diagonal, this could be complicated. So no doubt that's why Bobby prefers g3. King h7 is played, and now knight f4, putting the question to this knight by super attack. Again, the bot prefers to put the question from the other side of the board, and if takes, we're going to take with our bishop. Bobby saying, I like the king's side. So knight takes, and still take with the bishop. Obviously, you don't want to take with the pawn and open up your king. Here, queen e6 was played, forming a battery on the e-file. But, yeah, playing rook e2 first is an important move. It's a nice active move, but it makes the rook the spearhead of the battery instead of the queen. So, for example, if we play h4 here, queen e6, and you still get that battery, but it's a better battery because it's the rook spearheading. You generally don't want your queen to be the spearhead of a battery unless it's delivering the checkmate. Well, queen e6 was played by Ólafsson and bishop d2. Rook c8 then, and that's also marked as a mistake. b5 being called for. b5's interesting, isn't it? The queen, of course, defending here, and this kind of limits the queen. I actually thought queen e4 here would probably remain equal. That gets a check mark. But rook c8, not liked at all, and rook e1 hits the queen. Now queen f7, and you still want to play b5, so you need the queen to defend a6 so that the pawn doesn't have to. So queen f7 isn't the best choice. You should rather play queen f6 so that you can play b5, for example, after rook e7. Ooh, double exclam, ladles and jelly spoons. Not sure why that gets a double exclam. Oh, because it's under attack from the queen, right. Yeah, the problem is if you take here with the queen, we get this check right here, and that's a fork. but I didn't expect it to get a double exclam because usually, okay, if you sacrifice material, you get a double exclam, but this seemed pretty easy to see. So b5 would be played here instead. And again, the queen defends the A-man. Okay, queen f7 was played, so if Mike rook e7 got a double exclam, Bobby's should as well, and it does. This dark matriarch is overworked, isn't it? So queen g6 was played. You could try b6. The bot says this as well. b6, hoping for rook takes queen, but we wouldn't. We'd play queen b4 defending our rook here and force you to move your queen. Now, obviously, the same fork is in place. You don't want to take, you don't want to take the rook and allow this. It's the same thing. It's just different. So rook e7, queen g6, rook takes the b-man, pawn f4, queen d5. Don't play bishop takes pawn. That would be a blunder, and that allows queen b1 check. And after king g2, you get the fork, and that will be black's game. So be careful about those free pawns. So queen d5 prevents the fork. Nice defensive move. Rook e8, so f takes g3 being called for. That's going to be answered by h takes g3. Do not capture with the pawn. We'll come back to that in a moment. After h takes g3, king h8, and then you can double your majors on the d file. But generally, you want to capture toward the center with your pawns anyway. There are some exceptions. This is clearly not one. You don't want to open the king's left flank here. Again, queen b1 check can be played, and after king f2, queen d3 hits the bishop. And with rook e8 or rook f8 lurking, so you've got trouble. If you try to defend the bishop, you've got rook e8, and that's problematic. And if you just go away, you got rook f8. So f takes g3 is best answered by h takes g3, and white has a decisive advantage. All right, rook e8 is played here, and now bishop takes the pawn on f4, and bishop e5 can be played because this bishop is pinned. So that's the threat. Rook e1 check, king g2, queen d3. All right, so we do have to be aware of queen f1 check, and for that reason, king h3 is played. Here, queen g6 then is played. Queen f1 is going to be answered by king h4. So Ólafsson brings the queen back to g6. Rook d7 here. Of course, we can take this. That's pinned, but a stronger attack is probably rook d6. h5, queen e6 is going to be answered by queen takes queen. The bot says queen e6, but not when you're behind in material. Okay, rook d7 was played, h5 was played. King back to g2, and once again, that puts bishop e5 back on the table. So now h4 was played, rook d6 finally played here, and that is where Ólafsson resigned. Hits the queen, pretty much is going to compel the queen trade. And after king f3 hitting the rook, I guess he could come to e1. But now this pawn goes away. We've got two passers here. If you try to push your passed pawn in the center, I'm probably able to give up my bishop for the pawn. You can't push right away. So if you say, well, I'll come here and defend, and now my passed pawn is defended, well, now rook d6 comes into play, x-ray, attacking the d2 square. So it's just a matter of time and technique for white with all these extra pawns. If you play rook d1 while you're blockading your own pawn. Probably trades this one off first, and right, this is falling, so it's just a matter of time. Let's look at the numbers. 92.3 accuracy from Bobby Fischer with a 2800 single game rating. Very nice indeed.